Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/supportbuddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program, and we're in a 4-part series where I'm teaching you Buddhist chanting. We're in part 2 of this 4-part series, where last week I taught you in detail about what Buddhist chanting is and why we would do it. And then I actually taught 3 individual chants and practiced with the students in doing the chanting. And then we used that chanting in order to ease the mind into meditation and actually do a meditation session and come out of the meditation as well. What I'm going to be doing today is just kind of reviewing and recapping, kind of refreshing your mind of what we talked about last week. And then we're going to practice the chants and then move into the meditation. So similar to what we did last week, but kind of an abbreviated session. So I would like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. And as we go in today's class, you're welcome to ask any and all questions. Whether you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can put your question into the comment section. I'll be able to see that. And if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. And if you're listening to this on the replay, either the podcast or YouTube or Facebook or any other place that we distribute content, you can always ask questions by putting those into our Facebook group. You can send me a private message, or you can schedule personal guidance, and I'll be able to help you that way as well. So just kind of recapping a bit of last week, is that last week I shared some individual things that are the reasons why, or the benefits of chanting, and kind of why I do chanting. I talked about setting up mindfulness in front of you before you start meditating, which is awareness of mind. We talked about kind of developing this awareness of mind, concentration, and memory, kind of exercising the mind with chanting, that when you're chanting, it's like exercising the mind. We talked about how it helps you to build this awareness of the breath, because as you're chanting, you're going to need to have awareness of the breath in order to chant for an extended period of time. And it helps to slow and relax and ease the mind into meditation, giving you this audible indication that your practice is improving, because you can hear from session to session and week to week that your practice is improving. And it even helps you to develop respect and gratitude for all the elders, all those people that have been passing the teachings down for 2,500 years, and Gotama Buddha himself. And it's important to remember that with chanting, there's no mystical or magical benefits. It's not a rite or ritual or ceremony or worship. It's not prayer or anything like that. You can't experience anything mystical or magical due to the chanting. During the lifetime of the Buddha, they used chanting as a way to commit the teachings to memory, because everything he taught was oral. The technology to write things down didn't exist in that part of the world. So they used chanting. Every 2 weeks, they would recite his teachings word for word for word as a way to commit them to memory. So this chanting nowadays, in some places, they try to, approach with this mystical, magical thing or something like this, but this isn't the way the Buddha taught it at all, that there isn't anything mystical or magical with prayer or any kind of chanting that you can do that's going to instantly manifest something in the world. This isn't actually true. The way that things occur in the world is through cause and effect, or action and result, is through wise decision making. So through the wise decision of choosing to chant, you'll experience these benefits, and it'll ultimately help you improve the quality of your mind and get better benefits out of your meditation. But chanting by itself, it actually isn't required anymore in order to get to enlightenment. During the lifetime of the Buddha, you were required to chant in order to get to enlightenment, because you had no other way of remembering the teachings or preserving the teachings within your own mind. But nowadays, you need to understand the meaning of the teachings and how to practice them. And you can look to books, audiobooks, podcasts, videos, things like this as a way that the teachings have already been preserved. but you don't need to actually chant them in order to commit them to your memory. You just need to be able to read or listen to an audiobook or watch a video and internalize the teachings and understand them. So chanting, while during the lifetime of the Buddha, it was required in order to commit the teachings to memory and actually be able to practice them, that you don't need to do that anymore. So if you practice this for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and it's going really well for you and you notice like, wow, this is really helpful, then great, continue to chant. But if you're noticing that, yeah, you don't really like chanting too much, then you don't have to chant. You're not required to chant in order to get to enlightenment. But I always encourage people, whenever they're doing something new like this in their practice, as they're shifting things around, to work with it for a good 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks maybe, because when you first do something for the first time, the unenlightened mind will typically reject it because it doesn't like change. It doesn't like impermanence. It doesn't like when things are changing. When we talk about the Four Noble Truths, we mentioned how the mind is craving permanence. Another way to say that is the mind does not like impermanence. It doesn't like change. So when you implement something new like this, oftentimes the mind doesn't like it, or it rejects it, or it pushes it aside. It doesn't want to arise the ambition, the motivation, the energy, and the effort to learn something new. So I encourage students to practice it for several weeks before you really decide whether or not you're going to include it into your practice long term or not. So these are some of the benefits that we talked about last week. And then I moved into sharing these chants with you, which I'm going to do for you today, and we can be practicing them together. I'm going to do each one twice, where last week I walked you through slowly but surely. I'm going to do it, and you can do it with me the first time, and then the second time we can go through it again so that you get a little bit of practice of the chant. And then we'll put it together and we'll do a meditation session together. So this is the triple gem, or the triple jewel. This is a chant that is used pretty much at every Buddhist event. When you first start the Buddhist event, you'll see that the leader will typically be starting with this chant. So you can chant this together with me if you like. We'll do it the first time, and then we can do it a second time and give you a chance to practice it. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakeva Hotang Mahakavanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami. Okay, so this is the first chant. So you might notice at the end of each phrase, I'm gesturing with a bow. Oftentimes people will bow to the floor when they're in a big group because they're sitting on the floor typically. This is just to show respect and gratitude to the Buddha, the teachings, and the community. It helps to humble your mind. You're not required to bow, but it's something that you can do. Everything you do in your practice, it's your choice. You're not required to bow. You're not required to chant. You're not required to do anything in life but die. That's the only thing that you're going to have to do. Everything else is optional. So these chants, I'm showing you how people chant. I'm showing you and teaching you how it benefits you. But whether you choose to do it or not, or how you choose to do it, is up to you. It's your practice. So this is the first chant. And here I'm going to do it again, give you guys a chance to practice it again before we move on to the next one. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakeva Hotang Mahakavanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami. Okay, so that's the first chant that I taught you guys. Let me see if you guys have any questions about this one before we move into the next one. Remember, you can ask your questions by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. All right, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So let's move on to the next chant, which I refer to as the Namo Tassa. This is just the same phrase that's repeated 3 times, and this is respect to the Buddha. And remember, these chants, the Buddha didn't actually create them, in my opinion. It was either his students during his life or after his death that potentially created these chants, because a Buddha and an enlightened being, they would have already eliminated their ego and their arrogance. They wouldn't have taught their students to chant something to them. This isn't what the Buddha would have done. But if you learn from a teacher of how to move from the anger and sadness and frustration and all those other discontent feelings to the peace and the joy that is permanent, and they didn't want anything from you or expect anything from you, as your mind is getting closer and closer to enlightenment and you're noticing the improvements to your life, you'd probably have a lot of respect and gratitude for that teacher. So I know that people would have had an enormous amount of respect and gratitude for the Buddha during his lifetime, because I have an enormous amount of respect for him now, and I didn't even live in this life during his lifetime. So I can imagine the people that lived during his lifetime must have had an enormous amount of respect for him. So these chants, as you see, there's a great deal of gratitude, appreciation, admiration, and respect for the Buddha, because he helped people move from that anger and sadness and all those other discontent feelings like guilt and shame and fear and boredom and loneliness to this peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy, with all those benefits that I talk about with enlightenment. And he didn't want anything or expect anything from his students, so they would have had an enormous amount of respect for him. And I can easily see how they would have created these chants either during his life or after his death. So this one here is all about respect to the Buddha. But remember, it's not a prayer, it's not worship or anything like that. So here I'll chant it for you the first time, and you're welcome to chant with me, and then we'll chant it a second time. It's going to be the same phrase 3 times. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Okay, so that's this particular chant. So let's do it again, so you get a chance to experience it again and practice it again. If you need a little glass of water or a sip of water, feel free to get one of those. I might do that myself. Okay, so here we go for the second time through. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Okay, let me know if you guys have questions on this. You can put it in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or in Zoom you can raise your hand electronically. Okay, it looks like Bettina has a question here. When you are pronouncing, it sounds more like Namo Tassa. Oh, so it's Namo Tassa, not name Tassa. It's Namo Tassa. Namo. There's a little bit of Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. For those of you guys that studied the 4 stages of enlightenment with me, where I taught you about stream enter, once returner, non-returner, and arahant. Arahant is an enlightened being. Here you can see the Pali word for that, arahato, when they're chanting it, right? So Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. So you can see the English translation there, that essentially you're paying respect to this perfectly enlightened one, the worthy one, the rightly self-awakened one. Okay, all right, looks like you got your answer there, Bettina. And I'm not seeing any questions anywhere else. So let's move into the next chant, which I refer to as the ETP So, but I know that there's probably other ways to refer to this as well. So again, let's chant it 2 times, give you guys a chance to practice it, okay? Iti piso mahakawa arahang sama sambuddho vicacaranang sampuno sakato rukawito Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Poto Bhagavati. So there at the end, I kind of drag it out a little bit and give a little bit of a bow, okay? So here we'll chant it again, and then after this, we'll do the actual meditation together where we can incorporate these into our meditation. Iti piso mahakawa arahang sama sambuddho vicacaranang sampuno sakato rukawito anutero purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Poto Bhagavati. Okay, let me know if you guys have questions on this. Looks like Julia has a question. Thank you, Teacher David. Do all Buddhists from different countries do the exact same chants because it is in Pali? If it's a Theravada Buddhist country, or even just place that's doing and practicing Theravada Buddhist teachings, then yeah, they're going to most likely be chanting in the Pali language. So even like in America, North America, South America, Australia, Europe, if it's a Theravada Buddhist temple, they should be chanting in the Pali language. That's typically what they do. Where the other traditions of teachings, they will usually chant in the local language, so Chinese or Vietnamese or some other local language, where whether you're in Sri Lanka or Myanmar, or Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, North America, Australia, Europe, any of these places, they're going to be chanting in the Pali language. Now the dialect's going to be a little bit different. Like, for example, back to this chant of the Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. Actually, you know what? Let's do this one. The Arahang. I know, like, when I've heard people from Sri Lanka that are chanting the Arahang, where in Thailand we chant that Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava. That's the way we chant it here. But in Sri Lanka, they will say something like Arahang Samma Sambuddho, because this is actually where you're saying Buddha. Here is Puto. That's the way we say it. Pali here in Thailand, where in Sri Lanka they'll say Buddho, right? Because this is the impermanent nature of chanting, that different places will chant it different ways because of impermanence. There's not just one set exact way that everybody chants it exactly this way, because that would be permanence if that was the case, and that doesn't exist. So yeah, you'll hear the different countries, different temples that are practicing the Theravada tradition, they'll be chanting in Pali, but you're going to hear slight differences. But when we all chant together, it just all harmonizes and it just comes together and everybody chants it together. And then Julia has another question here. Do you recommend chanting before every meditation session or listening to chanting before meditation? Yeah, you can chant before meditation and after meditation too. But remember, even your chanting is impermanent, that you're not going to do it every single time. So I, for a long time, chanted, before and after every single session. But then there's times where, like, my son might be sleeping in the bed next to me when he was younger, and I couldn't chant before I went to sleep out loud because he was laying in the bed next to me and it would have woke him up. So I chose not to chant. Or there's been times where I've been on an airplane meditating, I'm traveling maybe 24 hours around the globe, and I'm on an airplane and I need to meditate, and I won't do chanting there. I might just do it quietly within my own mind, because it's still helping to refine the mind and build the memory and awareness of the breath and things like this. So you may not actually chant in some situations. And nowadays, because I'm teaching so much and I use my voice a lot and meditating and chanting a lot, I actually chant typically when I'm with students now. But more often than not, I'm not even chanting when I'm doing my own meditation practice, because this is just where I am in my practice, that I am talking so much, teaching all these classes, that I noticed I started losing my voice, and I was interested in ensuring that I can teach for the rest of this life. So I chant when I'm with students now, and I will occasionally chant when I'm doing meditation by myself, but oftentimes I'm just easing into meditation on my own and I'm coming out of it without chanting. But I used chanting for a long time at the beginning to develop the ability to do that, because when I first started meditating, I needed something like chanting to be able to develop it so that the mind was able to ease into meditation. If I didn't have chanting when I first started meditating, I wouldn't be able to now, so many years later, be able to easily ease into meditation. So you can chant before and or after, but just understand sometimes you may leave it off, right? And that's okay, because your chanting is impermanent. So chanting it yourself is going to produce the most benefits, but if you need to listen to it, you can. Just remember that that's not permanent though, right? You're not going to always have, YouTube or podcast or your mobile phone with you. So you're not interested in getting your mind attached to the chanting. In fact, if you chant, say, for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and you're not quite sure whether you're attached to it or not, what I would encourage someone to do is stop chanting for a couple of sessions here and there and introduce some impermanence to be sure that the mind is still comfortable meditating without chanting. This will ensure that the mind doesn't get attached to it by introducing some impermanence. This is the same thing, like, say you were used to falling asleep every night with the fan on, and you're used to that sound, right? And you're falling asleep with the fan. You would like to introduce some impermanence, like turn it off a few nights here and there and train the mind to be able to fall asleep without the fan constantly running. So whenever you're noticing that the mind's tending to do the same thing over and over and over again, you would like to introduce some impermanence and train it that you're not going to get this thing permanently. So if you go to the same restaurant and order the same thing all the time, sometimes go there and don't order that thing. And this will help your mind to ensure that you don't have craving, desire, attachment, right? This is really helpful for the mind to introduce some impermanence into your life, because there's already going to be impermanence, but in some situations, it's really helpful for you to proactively implement some impermanence into your practice, like chanting or with a fan on it that's at night, or going to a restaurant and ordering the same thing, or any of these number of things that you see the mind repetitively doing the same thing over and over and over again. Introduce some impermanence. Even if you drive home from a particular particular place the same exact way every day. Mix it up sometimes and go a different way and train the mind like, hey, you're not going to always get the same things all the time. And this is really beneficial and helpful for the mind. And I know you have young children too, Julia. You can do this for your children too. Like if they're used to the same exact thing happening in their day, like usually we're taught to have a routine for a child. And this is helpful as they're kind of aging. But every once in a while, you would like to introduce some impermanence into their life. That if normally at 2 o'clock they always watch cartoons, rather than allowing their mind to get attached to that, some days at 2 o'clock read a book or go outside for a walk or do something else. And they're like, Mommy, I want to watch cartoons. It's 2 o'clock. Yeah, I know. So let's go outside for a walk. We'll do something different. So rather than them getting attached to it and complaining and being upset when they don't get it, sometimes you're going to need to introduce some impermanence into their life and help them to not get attached to things too, because they don't have the wisdom that you're cultivating, but you do. So you can introduce some of this impermanence into their life so that it helps them to not get attached to things. Since they're so young, their mind is very trainable and it hasn't yet accumulated a lot of pollution. So you can be doing some of these things with your children. Okay. So let me just check, see if we have any other questions anywhere before we move into meditation. I don't see any questions anywhere. Thank you guys for your questions. That's really helpful for you guys to learn. So let's go ahead and do the chanting to ease into meditation. Then once we get into meditation, I'll give the guidance on breathing mindfulness meditation. Then there'll be a period of time where it'll just be quiet and we're meditating together. Then I'm going to bring in the guidance for loving kindness meditation. And then we're going to come back to breathing mindfulness meditation and then come out with the chanting. Last week we did breathing mindfulness meditation, integrating the chanting into that. So now let's do it with the loving kindness meditation. Okay, so if you'd like to take a position, either seated, lying, or standing, these are helpful positions for loving kindness meditation. We don't typically do this one in the walking position. So if you'd like to chant along, you can chant along. Just make yourself comfortable with your body. And then once we finish the chanting, I will come back in with the guidance. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanang Apivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti Piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sambuddho Sakato Rokavito Anutero Purisa Dhamma สติสตาตวามนุสนังพุทโธภาควาติ Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, in the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then, when you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And when you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. Then I'll be back with more guidance on loving kindness meditation. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Continuing to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. When you get to your next out breath, repeat these affirmations in the mind. May I be peaceful. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May Mom and Dad be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May my family, friends, co-workers, and neighbors be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May all those who have harmed me be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May all those who I have harmed be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May all beings be peaceful. May all beings be safe. May all beings be well. May all beings be free of discontentedness in the suffering it causes. Now go back to breathing mindfulness meditation, focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. Breathing in and out. ควาโพตังมหาเกวันหังอาภิวาเตมิสวากขาโตภะคะวะตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสภะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมพุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสาดัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังโพโตภะคะวะติ Okay, if you'd like to slowly make your way out of meditation, what I'm going to do for the duration of our class is just open up to any and all questions that you guys might have. You can ask questions about chanting if you like. You can ask questions about the Eightfold Path, the Four Noble Truths, meditation, anything and everything related to your practice. Even if you're having some personal struggles or challenges, if you'd like to talk about those and get help with those, you can do that during classes. So just put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and I'll be able to see that and answer your question. But if you're in Zoom, you can also raise your hand and ask any questions that you like. Okay, it looks like we have a question coming in from Julia. Teacher David, do you have any tips on how to stay present in daily life? I find myself overthinking of the future and the past that I cannot concentrate on the present. Thank you so much. Sure. So if you're just thinking about the past, for example, like say in the present moment, you're thinking about something that occurred in the past and you're trying to look at it and say, you know, what can I do to make this better? Or what did I do really well in the past that I should continue to do? This is inner reflection, and this is fine. When we talk about being in the present moment, it doesn't mean that you never think about the past. It means that you practice singleness of mind and you just do one thing at a time. So while you're thinking about the past and you're reflecting on that, just do that, right? Don't be washing dishes and thinking about the past. You know, sit down, reflect, look at the mind, think about things from the past, and reflect on it and see what you could do to continue to do those wise things that you did in the past, and look at the things that you did that was unwise and think about if you experience those same situations again, what would you do differently? And you can do the same thing about the future. Like you can plan the future. Like as you guys, I think some of you kind of know, is I'm planning to go to Mexico in September because some students invited me and they're supporting me to travel and they've asked me to come teach. So I'm going to be there for 3 weeks. So I've done some preliminary planning on that, right? And kind of planning ahead, but I did that in the present moment. And that's what it means to be in the present moment, is focus on a single object or a single thing. So that's being in the present moment or practicing singleness of mind. Now, if you're having obsessive thoughts or intrusive thoughts, that's what you're looking to eliminate. Like say you're washing dishes and your mind goes to the past, or if you're in a business meeting and your mind's going to the future, thinking about lunch, or say you're just having obsessively intrusive thoughts. The way that you get this to be better, and it's going to take gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress, is yes, you need breathing mindfulness meditation. You need to do that consistently and build up enough benefits of that over a long-term period. You need to practice generosity, which is giving and sharing, training your mind to let go, right? That's what both of those trainings are doing, is helping your mind to let go of craving, desire, attachment, because that's what's going on when your mind's overactive. But then in the present moment, with your mindfulness or awareness of mind, that right mindfulness, you need to apply right effort, which is to cut it off and let it go. Understanding that you're going to have a very hard time doing that because you haven't accumulated enough benefits yet. You just started training your mind in the last few months, and you're going to need to accumulate benefits of breathing mindfulness, meditation, and generosity, so that when you're in the present moment and these obsessive thoughts or intrusive thoughts, or your mind's bouncing around all over the place, you can cut that off and let it go, right? And sometimes what you need to do is redirect the mind, right? What you would ultimately be able to do as you get closer and closer to enlightenment is internally cut it off. That you'll see it with your mindfulness and you'll be able to internally cut it off. But let's say you're watching TV and you're just watching TV and all of a sudden your mind wanders to the past or it's wandering to the future. You could cut off the TV and just sit there and think about, or pause it, right? And think about the past. That's one way to do it. Or you might decide to cut off the TV and go for a walk, redirect the mind. So as you're working to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, we say cut it off and let it go, right? But in reality, you're really cutting it off and 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 cutting it off, maybe over multiple times. And then finally, the mind lets go. The Buddha refers to this as maturing in release, that you need to mature the mind and then it will release. So you're cutting it off and cutting it off and cutting it off and cutting it off and cutting it off, maybe over multiple days, maybe multiple hours, maybe multiple months, before the mind will finally let that thing go. There's some cravings that I had that I was working on for many years before the mind actually let it go. Right? This is just the nature of the unenlightened mind, that it holds on and it craves permanence. It's clinging to these things. So I wouldn't suggest that you expect, immediate results. It's, even though we say cut it off and let it go, you're really cutting it off and cutting it off and cutting it off. You can think about it like a wild bush, that if a wild bush was growing, you would have to cut it back and cut it back and cut it back and cut it back. And then maybe you go attend to something else, and now that wild bush grows a little bit, and now you got to cut it back and cut it back and cut it back and cut it back. And then you go attend to something else. And we're talking about multiple weeks and days and months here, right? And then it kind of grows a little bit more. And then you cut it back and cut it back and cut it back and cut it back. And you go through this process, but each time it's getting less and less until eventually you get to the point where you've uprooted it out of the mind. When you finally uproot this wild bush, it won't grow anymore. But you got to cut it back and 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 cut it back. And then over time, you will uproot this particular craving or this particular clinging that the mind's doing. So be patient with yourself, developing that breathing mindfulness meditation and the generosity, and just in the present moment where you see the mind doing these kinds of things, cut it off. Cut it off, cut it off. And more you'll get down to the root and you'll be able to uproot it and actually let it go. Okay, so here's some more questions here. Let's see. This is from Patina. It says, thank you for the answer. This was a very good question. I also have a question how to stay more concentrated in daily life. During work, I am very present because I work with people, but after work, I tend to distract the mind too much, especially too much social media. How can I stay more concentrated on the present moment? Yeah, it's the same thing. Like say that you're noticing that you're indulging in social media for hour upon hour upon hour. The mind's picking it up, right? But it doesn't know how to put it back down. So that's what you're trying to train the mind to do, is to be able to pick something up and put it back down. Because there's nothing wrong with social media. There's a lot of beneficial things that can come from social media. But it's when you're doing it for an extensive period of time that you're not able to do the things that you need to do maybe over here in this other part of your life because you're indulging in the social media so much. So what you would like to do is pick it up for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and put it down and walk away and go do something else. If you need to bury your phone or bury your device into like a suitcase and zip it up or buckle it up or bury it in a drawer somewhere, go for a walk, go do something else. You just look at it for 3, 4, 5 minutes perhaps, and you've put it down, and then now you go do something else. Because it's when you get 30 minutes, an hour into it that it's hard to put it down. But in the first kind of 3 to 5 minutes, it's usually easy to put it down. So put it down and then go do something, right? Go do something for 30 minutes, an hour, what have you, and then come back and pick it up again and use it for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, what have you, and then put it down and then go do something else. Do this continuously, where what you're doing is you're training the mind to put it down and put it down and put it down, and do this continuously. And then over time, you will then have the control and the discipline with your breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and your generosity, training the mind to let go. And then doing this kind of thing outside of meditation, you'll be able to let it go. So the problem isn't that you're picking up social media. That's fine if you'd like to look at social media. The problem is you can't put it down. So you got to train your mind to be able to put it down. And this is the way to do that. So great question there. Oh, okay. Yes, the patina. It is very similar to the question that was just asked by Julia. But here, I was sharing with you another aspect of it in terms of uprooting it out of the mind. This is the way that you do that. So if it's just obsessive thoughts, like maybe what Julia was asking, I gave her an answer for that. But if it's a certain object like social media, or I don't know, say you usually sit down and you eat a big chocolate bar and you can't put it down until you've eaten the whole chocolate bar. What you would like to do is eat 1 bite or 2 bites and then put it down, walk away from it, go do something for a day or two, and then come back and now a little bit of your chocolate bar again, and then put it down and now go away. So you can implement this with any number of cravings, desires, attachments. It's the same methodology. This is the beauty about the teachings, is that once you understand the methodology behind this and you apply it to one particular craving, desire, attachment, and you see the mind is let go, and now you have more peace and more concentration, you'll be able to apply it to every single craving, desire, attachment that you have. So the concentration that you guys are asking about, and the focus and the clarity of mind, where that's coming from is eliminating the pollutions of the mind. Sometimes we think that it's coming from the meditation itself. Well, it's not the meditation itself that is producing the concentration. It's actually training the mind to let go. It's training the mind to get rid of these cravings, desires, attachments. The meditation is the tool or technique that's training the mind to let go. But it's when the mind has let go of its various cravings, desires, attachments, that now there's less pollution in the mind, and that's where the concentration comes. So yes, you need to meditate and practice generosity to train the mind to let go, but then you need to do things like this outside of meditation in order to train the mind to let go. And then that's what's going to produce the concentration, because your mind doesn't have all that pollution, circulating around. It's kind of like the way that we've been doing it throughout our life is putting the dust under the carpet. And now what you would like to do is pull the carpet back and clear the dust out. As long as the dust is flying around, you're going to choke and you're going to gag. It's the same kind of thing, that as long as these cravings, desires, attachments are floating around in your mind, you're not going to have concentration, because your mind's like, I can't function. You got too much craving in here. You got to clear this stuff out, right? So when you clear out these cravings, desires, attachments to social media, to certain foods, to certain people, and things like this, this is where the concentration comes from. So the breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and generosity is training the mind to let go, but then you need to do things outside of meditation so that the mind will let go, and you can uproot these things out of the mind. All right, so great conversation here, guys. Let's see if we have any other questions coming in. I don't see any other questions anywhere. So what I'll do then is just thank all of you guys for coming to class. Thank you for your determination, dedication, and diligence to learning and practicing these teachings. Next week in the Wednesday class, I'm going to be in part 3 of our 4-part series on learning Buddhist chanting. And then this Sunday in the group learning program, we're going to be in chapter 6 of the book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This book, we're going chapter by chapter each Sunday. So if you'd like to read either before class or after class, this is a very short chapter that you could probably read in all of about, maybe 15 minutes or so, probably tops. If you read that either before or after class, this will really help you to get the teachings to soak in, because there's certain things that I have in the books that aren't in the actual classes. And then there's certain things in the classes that aren't in the books. So by the time you're reading the book and coming to class and integrating these teachings into your life, this is where you see the real improvement to the condition of the mind. So thank you for your dedication and diligence to learning and practicing. You're always welcome to attend any of the classes, courses, and retreats that I have, whether you're here in Chiang Mai, Thailand, whether you're online learning with me, or whether as I travel around the world to all these different places, you're more than welcome to attend any and all of these learning events to help you develop your life practice. So thank you again for joining, and perhaps we'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Have a very wonderful and lovely rest of your day. Take care. Sawadee krap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.